Rivalry week in college football, final week of the regular season, and there's no rivalry bigger than Ohio State-Michigan. Simply put, it's the game. Chris Fedor with you here on cleveland.com to preview this one between Ohio State and Michigan on both sides. From our Ohio State reporting team here on cleveland.com, we've got 1/3 of the team. He is Doug Lesmerises. Doug, good to have you again, bud.
How you doing, Chris?
Doing great, my friend. And from the Michigan side of things, from mlive.com, he covers the Wolverines. He is Nick Baumgardner. What's going on, Nick?
Not much, Chris. Good to be here.
All right, guys, so we are getting closer and closer. It's Saturday at noon, Ohio State and Michigan. And, Nick, we'll start with you. Last year it was a big spread, and it turned out to be a close game between the Buckeyes and the Wolverines. Do you think this game could go the same way? Is Michigan capable of hanging with the Bucs from what you've seen?
Yeah, I don't think this is quite the same thing. I think this is a little bit different. You know, last year, obviously, the game was played at home for Michigan. I think when we look back on it, we can say, I think somewhat that Ohio State might have been sort of tailing off a little bit toward the end of last season, as opposed to, I think, this year, I think they're sort of trending upward. They've obviously got the game at home as well. And beyond that, you know, Michigan's offense, last year it had shown flashes of what we saw in that Michigan-Ohio State game throughout the year. You know, there were times during that season where they were explosive and they had made big plays, so you knew it was possible. This season it hasn't happened. It hasn't happened once. So you know, I'm not so sure it's possible. So I don't think this is a similar situation. I think I'd be surprised if we saw something like that again. You know, I think Michigan will have some emotions, obviously, and it'll play hard, but I just don't think the offense has anything close to what it had last year in terms of potential to sort of come in there and maybe surprise some people.
Doug, on the other side of things, Ohio State coming off a close win against Indiana the week before that. They were tested by Minnesota, and now they're playing Michigan, the rivalry game. Is Ohio State prone to some kind of thing that happened last year, or do you think this is a different and a better team from a year ago?
Yeah, I mean, you know, as Nick said, they are a little more on the upswing. To go win at Michigan State was a really good win, and that was about the best I think Ohio State could play, at least on the offensive side of the ball. You know, at Minnesota and then Indiana last week, the one thing that's cropped up is these turnovers. And, you know, sometimes you get a little loose with the ball. That happens. They say they're working on that with the guys. JT Barrett has been very, very good this year. He does have 10 interceptions. You know, in a game like this, could that crop up? I do think that as long as these turnovers are there for Ohio State, and there are other very good teams in the country who are having turnover problems this year. I think Alabama has a negative turnover margin. But the Buckeyes have made 8 in the last 3 games, and that's the best way, you know, to keep an opponent in the game. You know, if they hit a game where that's not an issue, we might really see them at their best again. But I did think, you know, what happened against Indiana last week, well, you know, probably was part emotional, having that squeezed in between some other big games. But I think there were some other things there that, you know, if Michigan could somehow find a way, Ohio State's very good, but they're not perfect.
Chris Fedor from cleveland.com being joined by Doug Lesmerises, 1/3 of our Ohio State reporting team here at cleveland.com to talk the Ohio State side of things, and Nick Baumgardner from mlive.com. He covers the Wolverines, previewing the game between Ohio State and Michigan on Saturday at noon. Nick, so much of the conversation in Michigan centers on Brady Hoke. There's been tons of speculation about his future, what could happen in Michigan moving forward. Will this outcome at all impact the thinking when it comes to Brady Hoke and his future, or is he coaching his final regular season game on Saturday?
Yeah, I don't think this game will have any. I think this is it. I think this is win or lose. I think this is probably, if they win, maybe he coaches a bowl. But either way, you know, I don't think this changes anything. I think that, and you know, and it's interesting and kind of weird. I guess, you know, he spoke earlier this week, and he sounded like a guy, you know, talking to us that sort of knew that you know, hey, I mean, they've had some struggles, they've had some bad seasons, they're nowhere near where they need to be. One win against Ohio State, while it would be a great win and everybody would love it, it's not going to change where you're at as a program. It's not going to change the fact that you're you're way behind here in terms of where you are against your rivals and even other teams in the Big Ten. I mean, you were 2 touchdowns worse than Minnesota at home. Nebraska's very so on and so forth. I don't think this is a game that can save him. There's just been too much damage done. I think that he understands that at some degree. That said, if this is his last game, I think he's always had a big importance on this Ohio State game. It means a lot to him. So obviously he'll coach as hard as he can, but I just don't think anything that could happen in this game is going to do anything to save him. I think the damage has sort of already been done, and I think, while Nolan has said it formally, and maybe they haven't totally made up their mind 100%, I think that once the season's over with, Michigan will be going through another coaching change.
Nick, are you surprised, given the changes there and given the struggles, that he was able to finish out the year?
No, because, I just think that given the situation with Dave Brandon, given the AD turmoil and everything else, I don't know what firing a coach in the middle of the season would have done. I don't know. I don't think it would have saved anything. I don't think it would have fixed anything. I'm not sure what it would have accomplished, because you're already in a dicey spot with an AD who was under fire and then eventually was, you can say he quit, whatever, he was forced out, whatever it was. He's gone now, so now you have an interim athletic director. There's so much uncertainty that I'm not sure what firing him in October or whatever would have done. I just think letting them play out the season was sort of the right thing to do, and I think that's the right thing to do for most places, because I think future coaches look at that and say, well, are you going to kind of throw me under the bus quickly, or are you going to let me play the string out and do my job? So I think that was the right move to let him play the season out. I just think it's happened. It's continued on about how everybody expected.
Doug, none of that conversation around the Buckeyes. However, there is some speculation about the future. J.T. Barrett, Braxton Miller. Miller gets hurt before the season even starts, so Ohio State turns to freshman quarterback J.T. Barrett, who has been terrific here as of late. When it comes to J.T. Barrett, Doug, what's his mindset going into this one, playing against Michigan for the first time? How do you think he will respond?
It's funny. We talked to Troy Smith about that this week. He's having his number enshrined at Ohio Stadium on Saturday as a quarterback who beat Michigan 3 times. But a guy like Troy Smith, he said he had to sort of learn the rivalry when he got here, but he's a Cleveland guy. He's an Ohio guy. He grew up with this. I almost think there's a possibility for a guy like J.T. Barrett, who's from Texas, who said that the rivalry he went to growing up was Texas-Oklahoma. He's not steeped in this. He went through it last year while he was redshirting. He said it opened his eyes a little bit. But, this is big, but it's not like J.T. Barrett grew up sitting in front of the TV envisioning himself playing in the Ohio State-Michigan game someday. So I think that almost could be a plus for him. He's a pretty poised guy anyway, as a first-year starter, as a redshirt freshman. I think when he makes mistakes, it's more like mechanical thought process kind of things. It's not as much panic. It's not trying to force things or whatever that is. So I think he'll probably be okay because, for him, going to Michigan State on the road in prime time against a team that beat Ohio State last year, that was a huge game. I mean, he understands what this is, but he's still learning it a little bit. I don't know that he'll necessarily have Michigan butterflies before a game like this.
Nick, speaking of quarterbacks, when looking back at Brady Hoke's time at Michigan, is that his biggest failure, the fact that he was never able to find that answer at the most important position?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I think everybody wants to look at the offensive line and the struggle they've had there, but I really do think that if you go back and you look at 2011, they come in here with a guy like Denard Robinson, who, Denard had problems with his arm, and he was a flawed player, but he was still a dynamic football player. I mean, he was still one of the most explosive athletes in college football, and they had no idea what to do with him. They never figured out what to do to maximize, Denard Robinson's potential. He was there for 2 years with them, and they never figured it out. And then they bring in another guy like Devin Gardner, who's got all these athletic capabilities and can do all these things, and again, they just never figured out what to do with the guy. They've taken these square pegs and tried to shove them in round holes, and they've been doing that with their quarterbacks from day one. And then on top of that, you recruit a guy like Shane Morris, who's the type of guy you want, or you say you want, as a drop-back guy who can make plays. Well, we saw Shane Morris come into a game earlier this year. Obviously, he got injured, but before that, he looked nowhere near ready to do anything. So the development at the quarterback position has been non-existent, and I think that is the underlying if that would have been different, if they would have figured out what to do with Bernard and figured out a way to tailor an offense around Devin, I don't think we're sitting here talking about is this Brady Hoke's last game. Now maybe we're talking about, hey, you better do something here, or next year might be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you figured out your quarterback spots earlier on in your tenure, then maybe this isn't as dire as it is right now. But that's obviously something that they've struggled with from day one. Quarterback play has been inconsistent, and there's really no excuse for it because you've had tons of talent. You just don't know what to do with it, and that's kind of been a shame for the staff, and it's been a big problem.
Doug, you mentioned the approach of J.T. Barrett, but what's Ohio State's approach overall? Because it is the Michigan game, but Michigan is 5-6 on the season. Does this one still carry as much significance as it usually does in Columbus?
It's just an interesting window into the modern college football world because this is a team trying to make the playoffs, which would be 2 more games. This is a team trying to win a Big Ten title. These seniors have never won a championship. That's 2 weeks away. But, hey, guess what? The most important game of the year comes before that. So, you have a guy like Urban Meyer who did grow up with the game. They have all this stuff, all the bells and whistles that go in with the rivalry. I do think the guys do really buy into this, that, they're not going to be looking ahead to the Big Ten title game, even though Michigan has a losing record. I think it's strange that this series has been so dominated one way and then the other. Mm-hmm. For 13 years, Michigan dominated. Now we're in the stretch where Ohio State's dominating. But last year showed you that the games themselves can still be close. If this team needed a reminder that you can't take anything for granted, even though Nick said, maybe this Michigan team, it doesn't have the capability of last year's team to spring something like that, that was a reminder. So I do think they do all the things that go with it. They do senior tackle. They do, they have songs playing in the Woody. They can't say the word Michigan, all that kind of stuff. So I don't think they have to sell any Buckeyes on this, even though Michigan has 5 wins.
Doug, is there anything that could happen in the future to have Michigan State or a team like Wisconsin overtake Michigan as Ohio State's biggest rival?
If one of those teams, a couple years ago, I was selling the Wisconsin rivalry with Brett Bielema. It was, Bo Bryant in basketball. Both sports were a thorn in the side for Ohio State. Now they're not even in the same division. I sold the Michigan State rivalry this year, and then Ohio State went on the road and won that game. If there was a consistent year-after-year winner, and Michigan was not a year-after-year winner, it would gain ground. For sure, because the best part of a rivalry is that you don't know who's going to win, and that the game means something. Mm-hmm. That's what Woody and Bo did and made this game great. It was for the Big Ten title every year. If we can't get back to that, it is going to have some effect. It's never going to go away. So, can one other team, can Michigan State sustain it for a decade and not have it switch around all the time? Who the other good Big Ten team is? Maybe that would do something. But I think everybody on both sides would tell you they'd rather have Michigan get good and try to get this rivalry back to what it once was when these were the 2 best teams in the Big Ten on a regular basis.
Nick, what needs to happen from Michigan's side of things to get the rivalry back to what it was? Besides, of course, winning, how did they get there?
Well, yeah, winning, number one, but obviously, beyond that, this entire department, this athletic department, it's just been this public saga that everyone is well-versed in over the past 7 years with infighting and, inconsistencies at the top. You're going through another athletic director shift here. You hired a coach in 2011 that had a losing record, and there's not one person who's ever met Brady Hoke who will tell you he's a bad guy. But when the first thing you say about Brady Hoke is, boy, he's a really good guy, that probably means he's not a very good football coach. Yep. So at the end of the day here, what they need is they need to find a coach who can win games, number one, and who can compete at that level. Brady can recruit. Anybody can recruit to Michigan. That's not a problem. It's going to be a guy who's a tough coach, who kind of gets rid of some of this entitlement stuff, because a lot of these guys come here, they see these big, flashy facilities, and they see all this great stuff, and all these former players come around who tell them how great it was, and they just kind of seem to think, and at least it's been this way under Hoke, they just sort of seem to think that's going to happen for them sort of out of thin air. They need to really have somebody come in and kind of peel this thing back and rebuild it. sort of the way that it was back in the day. And I don't think it would take too much because I think you can still get talent here. It's just going to be about, guys are going to have to be accountable. The coach is going to have to be a forward-thinking person who isn't hell-bent on bringing back some sort of antiquated offense that we saw in the 70s and 80s. They're going to have to find a forward-thinking coach who's a tough, hard-nosed guy who does things the right way, wins the right way, and just works. And not that Brady Hoke doesn't work. He's just the job just seems too big for him, and it just always seems completely over his head. That can't be the case with the next person. The next person has to be somebody who's experienced enough, who's capable enough, and this isn't too big for him because this is a big job. This is a hard job. This isn't. This isn't like Michigan State where you can have a couple rough years and they'll be okay with it. You don't get to do that here. So the expectations are just like Ohio State. If you start slipping, heck, if Urban Meyer came in next year with 7-5, he'd have people screaming at him. So I mean, it's a tough job, and they need somebody who mentally can handle that. And that's the biggest thing. So you got to figure that out with your next football hire, and then what you do with your AD is also important. You need to find somebody who's firm at the top and is able to lead. So it's an interesting time for Michigan, a big transitional period coming up here, and they just got to find the right people. That's the big thing. You got to find the right people to lead you, and everything else from there, I think, kind of takes care of itself.
Nick, I remember a couple of years ago when Ohio State was in a situation looking for a head coach. So many people that were Buckeye fans wanted Urban Meyer. That was the guy at the top of the wish list. So when you talk about the top of that wish list up north, who's at it? Who's at the top?
Well, it's Jim Harbaugh. But, at the same time, when you look back at the Urban Meyer days, and I remember that, Urban Meyer was sitting there without a job. He was calling games on TV, and he was available. And it was pretty clear that he wanted that job and those types of things. Jim Harbaugh's coaching the NFL football team, who may or may not be in the playoffs this year. He already left college once to go coach the NFL, and then has never once said that he's interested in coming back. So there's no doubt that Jim Harbaugh loves this place, and he always will. It's just a matter of, does he want the job? Would the timing work? Is this all going to be a thing? This isn't like it was with Urban, obviously, in 2011 there, where it was kind of a slam-dunk deal. A lot would probably have to happen, and it would be something where Michigan would probably have to wait an awful long time if they are, in fact, going to remove Brady Hoke, say, next week. So I'm not so sure how realistic that is. I don't know if that's what's going to end up happening. Obviously, that would be their grand slam home run hire, and that's what everybody wants. I just don't know if that's totally realistic in the way we're doing things, because at this point, if you fire your coach tomorrow, Monday, let's say, you're then going to have to probably wait 6 weeks. 4, 5, 6 weeks without a coach. You're going to lose kids to transfer. You're going to have nothing on your recruiting level. It's just going to be complete mass hysteria, and then you're doing that basically just hoping that he says yes, unless you have some sort of backdoor signed deal. So I'm not sure how that works. I don't know if that's what you want to do or you want to bring somebody in sooner than that. I'm not sure. But Harbaugh is everyone's ideal candidate. I just don't know how realistic it is at this point.
All right, if he's the grand slam, who's the two-run shot?
I think people go back and forth. I've heard a lot of people tell me they don't want Les Miles.
Okay.
I'm not so sure why that's necessarily a thing. I mean, Les is I think he's 102 and 25 in the SEC over 10 years. I mean, he's 61, but it's not like he's 80 and he doesn't look 61. I don't think Les Miles would be a terrible hire, because I think that's a situation where the opposite of a Harbaugh, I think you could probably go to him earlier in December, and you could probably make it happen. You could probably get somebody like that in here a little quicker, and then maybe you could salvage your class and move forward. I think fans would probably be upset with that because that's not what they want, but I think that's something you could do quickly. From there, I think that Dan Mullen's obviously a pretty hot candidate right now. I think you probably have to wait a little while for him as well. So, it's interesting because after Harbaugh, nobody seems to want to talk about anybody. So every name you bring up, they kind of shoot down. But I think they could do an awful lot worse than a Les Miles or a Dan Mullen. But from there, it's interesting because there's no real outside of Les and Harbaugh. There's nobody else with these ties that we're so used to saying, oh, the guy was here before or whatever. It would really be kind of a wide open search, and it would be sort of a crapshoot. The other problem here, of course, is you have an interim AD. You don't have, and we don't know if that's going to be the boss of the next coach. So I think that the guy coming here, it would be easier to sort of sell on somebody that's coming here in good faith, coming here because they want to be at the school because maybe they have a past with this place. Hackett and Les Miles know each other, so that's a natural sort of deal. But it's very interesting. It's very tricky. I think if it does drag on and it goes on, if they fire him and then they wait a while, it could be one of the more interesting coaching searches we've seen in college football in a long time.
All right, guys, fill in the blank for me. We'll start with Doug here. Ohio State will win if blank.
If the Buckeyes don't turn it over. I mean, they've shot themselves in the foot so much. They've had a couple issues stopping the run game the past couple weeks. I don't know that that's going to be an issue with Michigan. They faced some really good backs the past 3 weeks. They probably have another one waiting for them in the Big Ten title game. But, I think Ohio State will have to help Michigan win this game. And it just so happens that they have been helping the opponent the past couple weeks, but they've been able to overcome it.
All right, for you, Nick, Michigan will win if blank.
If Ohio State helps Michigan, like Doug said, and if Michigan is willing to accept that help, because they've had instances where teams have kind of lined it up on a platter for them. You look at the Michigan State game, there were turnovers early in that game. Michigan State did not play well early in that game, but Michigan just refused to take advantage of it because the offense was so broken. So they're going to need help from Ohio State. They're going to need turnovers. They're going to need silly mistakes. They're going to need them to maybe get nervous. Maybe something like that happens where they play tight. So they're going to need that. And then on top of that, their offense is going to have to play the best game it's played all season by far for them to even have a chance.
Prediction time, Doug. Hit me with it.
Oh, Chris, I can't give you my predictions for Friday.
We all got to wait anymore, buddy.
The people, we saved the predictions for Friday. That's our big video.
Oh,
but
you're killing me.
I will tell you
Killing me.
that I was not surprised that the Ohio State-Indiana game was close last week. And I do think there may be a general vibe. People are really on Ohio State's bandwagon, I feel like, nationally. They're opening their eyes to Ohio State. People are very high on Ohio State right now. I almost think they might be a little too high on Ohio State right now. This is a very, very good team that has come a long way from Virginia Tech. Mm-hmm. This is a team that still has a couple things here and there that can trip them up, though.
Nick, can you give me one, or do you have to keep yours secret, too?
Well, I'm going to wait, too. But I'll just say this. The spread is, 20? I think it was 20?
Yes.
At the beginning of the week?
Yes.
I think that's fair. I think this game will be a cover at the end of the day.
All right, sounds good. Ohio State, Michigan, Saturday at noon. It is the game, the greatest rivalry in sports. And thanks so much to Nick Baumgardner from mlive.com and Doug Lesmerises, our own Ohio State beat reporter here at cleveland.com. Thanks, guys. Enjoyed it.
Thanks.
And thanks to all of you for joining us today. And check out all of our coverage online from Doug, Ari Wasserman, and of course Bill Landis. Will have so much more leading you up until Saturday at noon. Thanks for checking out cleveland.com.